Welcome, everyone, to our third happy hour in the new year. We have a special and unique program today titled Why I Started World Elephant Day with our guest speaker, Patricia Sims. I'm Jeff Schnabel with the Happy Hour Committee. The Kansas City branch is the sponsor of today's happy hour. Ideas for happy hour programs come from ESU members and viewers like you. At the end of this program, you will receive a survey where you can share your feedback on today's talk, and please send us your ideas for future happy hour programs. Patricia is looking forward to answering your questions at the end of the program. You may submit questions using the Q&A and chat modules at the bottom of your screen. I'm happy to report that we have over 120 people registered for today's program, including a number from overseas. Back in July of last year, I went on a wonderful 10-day Alaskan cruise on Cunard's Queen Elizabeth cruise ship. During the cruise, there were numerous programs and lectures for guests to attend. One of the lectures I found fascinating was a talk by Patricia Sims, who founded World Elephant Day in 2012. After her talk, I told her about ESU's happy hour programs and asked her if she would like to give a talk about World Elephant Day. She was delighted to share her journey with the ESU. And so Patricia is with us today. Patricia is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, director, and producer. She has directed documentaries around the world, focusing on stories that merge art, science, nature, and the interrelationships between humans and animals. She has collaborated with some of the world's leading conservation celebrities, scientists, and explorers, specializing in wildlife and oceanographic productions. Patricia has traveled in over 25 countries and has directed documentary features for Canadian and international networks, nonprofit organizations, and the United Nations University. Patricia is the founder of World Elephant Day, the annual global awareness day and campaign that brings attention to the critical threats facing elephants. So let's welcome Patricia to our ESU Happy Hour.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for that lovely introduction. It's really a pleasure for me to be joining everyone here today from the ESU USA community, and quite happy to share some of my experiences and my journey and my elephant conservation work and the creation of World Elephant Day, and some photography from a recent trip that I had to Kenya. And I think in the tradition of the ESU USA Happy Hour, I believe that we usually start our presentations with raising a glass to toast an occasion. So today I'd like to raise a glass to toast World Elephant Day for 2025. I don't think my camera's picking up the martini. We had a French martini, which was featured as today's cocktail. So I toast you all, and maybe you can enjoy this type of cocktail later this evening. But for now, I'm going to start with my presentation on why I started World Elephant Day. So as Jeff mentioned, I began World Elephant Day in 2012, but there was quite a lot of time that led up to that day. And that really actually began when I met this elephant here. Her name was Kamala, and she was an elephant living at the Calgary Zoo in Calgary, Alberta, here in Canada. And at that time, I became quite interested in elephant conservation and what was happening in the world of elephants. So I went to meet Kamala, And through that work, actually ended up learning quite a lot about elephants. And it started first by just learning some of the basic information, some of their natural history. Um, Essentially, there are three species of elephants in the world: the Asian elephant, the African savanna elephant, and the African forest elephant. And Kamala was an Asian elephant. Asian elephants live in continental Asia. There are less than 40,000 Asian elephants left in the world, so they are critically endangered species. And I guess one of the biggest differences between Asian elephants and the African elephants is, of course, the size of their ears. And the Asian elephant is a smaller elephant, although the male elephants, the bull elephants, do still have tusks, as the African elephants do, but the female Asian elephants don't actually have tusks. The African savanna elephant, the largest elephant, they're seen in the grasslands and wooded areas of Africa. Spectacular, big tusks. That's most of the iconic elephant that people can connect with and see mostly. And then the African forest elephant, which is found in Western Africa, um, highly endangered species as well. They live mostly in the forest. A bit smaller than the African elephant, slightly different ears, shape, and also tusks. But essentially, these are the three species left of elephants on the planet. And fundamentally, they're all threatened species. And part of my journey in understanding about elephants was first learning a little bit about what was needed and who these creatures actually are. So my first work actually took me to China to meet these elephants. And these were the wild elephants living at that time in the southwestern part of China and Yunnan province. And I guess a lot of people don't really know that elephants live in China, that there are wild elephants there. And this was really where I started my research work. And it was fascinating to learn about some of the challenges that this small population of elephants is facing in China. And eventually, through that work and interest, it led me to Thailand, where I became quite impassioned with the elephants that were being used as street begging elephants in the streets of Bangkok, which was a very disturbing situation at that time. How these were captive elephants and being used to sell sugarcane in the streets to raise money and basically attract tourists to support the livelihoods of these mahouts who were basically living from having captive elephants. Eventually, that led me to meeting up with other elephants in the region. This is my colleague and co-filmmaker Michael Clark, who did most of this early work with me and as my film in my filmmaking and in our early conservation efforts. And through this work, we ended up meeting up with Wok and Nong Mai. And Wok was a mahout who had his young elephant Nong Mai as a street begging elephant in Bangkok. And so I really wanted to learn more about their story and how this situation was even happening in Thailand. And this led me down this path, which essentially I guess I've been on ever since. I got quite involved in some of the captivity issues that elephants are facing in Thailand, and the street begging situation was a pretty grim situation to witness. And we began filming this and getting quite involved in the lives of the street begging elephants. And Wok and Nong Mai became quite dear to my heart, and they lived in a small village outside of Bangkok in the region known as Surin province. And we spent quite a lot of time filming there. And then on one particular day, I learned that Nong Mai was no longer in that village, that she had actually been purchased and taken to this location. And that to me was very, very surprising. This is Blanca Sanctuary. And I wanted to understand, well, how is this possible? How is Nong Mai being taken to this vast sanctuary? And I learned a lot at that point about the work of the Elephant Reintroduction Foundation, which is a royal foundation that was established by the Queen of Thailand. And they were releasing formerly captive elephants back to the wild. So Nong Mai had been purchased by this foundation to help the family and also to give Nong Mai a better life back in the wild. And so we wanted to follow her journey back to the wild. And this is what led us to create the documentary films that I then went on to produce for those next few years. This was Nong Mai a few years later, now living in the wild, no longer a street begging elephant. And essentially, through that work, the Reintroduction Foundation had released at that time over 100 different elephants back to the wild through a very successful program. And we did quite a lot of filming in that time. And I got to spend time there documenting some of the young baby elephants that were being born there. And eventually led to the creation of this film, Return to the Forest, which was a film documentary about the work of the Reintroduction Foundation and their efforts to reintroduce and replenish the wild Asian elephant population in Thailand. And also the feature film, When Elephants Were Young, which came out a few years later. Both of these films were narrated by William Shatner. Um, but along the way, there was a lot of terrible things were happening for African elephants. The situation for African elephants was pretty grim. More and more elephants were being slaughtered for their ivory. And this started up probably around 2008, 2010, around the time that we started doing our work in Thailand. And the situation was escalating. And it was down to an elephant was being killed basically every 15 minutes for its ivory, for its tusks, through consumer demand in, at that time, China. So this launched a global movement among a number of different elephant conservation organizations to stop this illegal slaughter of elephants. The purpose of this was to create trinkets such as this, carved items from ivory, no medicinal value, no value at all other than to support some idealistic idea of owning trinkets of ivory, which was ridiculous because ivory really belongs on elephants. Many organizations came together. This was one of the actions that was taken by the Kenya government in 2016, seized ivory that had occurred, burning of over 150 tons of ivory tusks as a statement against the slaughter of elephants for their ivory. So a lot of organizations rallied together to create this awareness, and that's what prompted me to create World Elephant Day. And that was on August 12th, 2012, when I brought the world together through reaching out to a number of different organizations around the world leading up to this to say, let's bring global attention to what's happening for elephants, the ivory crisis that was slaughtering all these elephants in Africa, and the bigger issues that we're still facing today, which has to do a lot with habitat loss, climate change issues, a number of different issues that are impacting the future of elephants. So World Elephant Day grew from that point and has now become a global day of awareness. Over these years, this is now 14 years ago, we generated quite a lot of global attention, a lot of media support, a lot of government support, and a lot of elephant organizations worldwide came together to reach out to the public, to stop the ivory trade, and to bring awareness to the plight of elephants. So Elephant Day, World Elephant Day, became quite successful as an outreach platform, as an educational platform, having quite a substantial global impact on education and teaching people about the importance of elephants and the importance that they have in habitat. And I guess the most important thing to realize about elephants is, as much as we love them and as an incredible animal, a very smart animal, they have social bonds, an emotional characteristics that are much like ours. And I think a lot of people really feel quite close to elephants and feel that in many ways elephants are a lot like people. But the other important thing to know about elephants is that they really are caretakers of our ecosystem. And they're a keystone species, which means that they are responsible for caretaking of the habitat and the biodiversity in the habitats of which they live, which are vast. They live in over 15 countries within Asia. They live in most of continental Africa. And they have an important role in maintaining biodiversity, not just for them and for habitats, but for all the other animals and plant life that live in these habitats as well. And they face really 5 big threats. poaching, which still goes on today to a lesser extent than it was up until about 5 or 6 years ago when a lot of different countries came together to enforce ivory trade. But climate change and loss of habitat have now become a very big threat and continue to be so, increasingly leading to human-elephant conflict where elephants and humans are competing for the same habitat. And at the same time, people want to make money from elephants and engage with elephants and have encounters with elephants. And so tourism and the tourism industry, although in some ways is very supportive for conservation initiatives, can also be at sometimes unethical and exploitive for elephants. And so we're always dealing with how elephants are treated in captivity as well. So this continues to be the work of World Elephant Day and the awareness building and the advocacy that is generated by over 100 different organizations that recognize World Elephant Day each year, as well as millions of people around the world come together on this day to recognize and celebrate elephants and what we can do to protect them. So for me, after running this for 14 years, it was really important for me to take a step back and have a look at maybe some of the positive impacts that have taken place despite all this doom and gloom that I'm talking about with respect to the challenges that elephants face. Um, Also, what are the good things that have happened? And there have been many, many good things that have happened for the protection of elephants. And a lot of organizations have come together doing fantastic work. So last summer, I had the opportunity to do my first World Elephant Day tour to Kenya to meet with some of the organizations that have been recognizing World Elephant Day and Friends of World Elephant Day since I founded it 14 years ago. And so I'm going to share with you now today some of the photos from my trip last summer to Kenya to meet these organizations and to see this work that they're doing. And my first stop was actually in Nairobi. And Nairobi has actually a national park right within its boundaries of a city. And I believe it's actually the only national park so closely within a large city area. And I had the opportunity to visit the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust nursery, where orphan baby elephants are brought to be rehabilitated and then eventually returned back to the wild. So this was an incredible opportunity for me to finally visit firsthand the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust nursery. So these elephants range in years from anywhere from very young, 6 months, up to about 5 to 6, 7, 8 years old. They're rescued from different parts within Kenya, and they end up there for different reasons. They're separated from their families. Sometimes they're from the earlier times of when poaching was an issue, killing their families. Drought also impacts baby elephants getting separated from their families, and so these orphaned elephants are found and then brought to this nursery, the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, which was established about 40 years ago by Daphne Sheldrick to basically protect and help orphaned wildlife in Kenya. It's a very special place, and the keepers there are special gifted people that have such a incredible heart for nurturing and raising these orphaned babies. I couldn't believe the opportunity to have actually meeting some of these orphans. I was amazed. This was one of the actually orphan babies that I had actually adopted, and this is one of the things that the Sheldrick um, Wildlife Trust really promotes is people to be able to support their work by adopting there's these orphans. So I encourage anyone who wants to help orphaned elephants in Kenya to look into the work of the Sheldrick Trust for this initiative. It's really quite incredible to see these young babies. There's about 21 of these orphaned elephants there now, and this is really just kind of the first stage of where they are for their whole process before they're put back to the wild. And it was great to be able to meet with these keepers firsthand and learn about how they develop their relationship with these orphans and how these babies learn to get along with each other and kind of form their own new family units because essentially they are all orphans. So they kind of build their new families with each other. And they have an amazing way of being together. The keepers who look after them really kind of have them really in good hands. It's almost like they're very well behaved school children or something. And they have a beautiful kind of area where they are looked after and sleep at night, which is within the region of the Sheldrake Wildlife Trust Nursery, which is actually within the Nairobi National Park. And it's quite amazing to actually see these young orphans come into their stalls every evening, to get their very cherished milk that is actually a special formula that had been actually developed by Daphne Sheldrake herself. This special formula that really emulates elephant milk, and this really helps nourish these elephants to be able to grow up big and strong, to become strong, mature elephants. And these elephants can't wait to get in and have their milk in the evening, and they're fed throughout the day. So it was really amazing to actually witness this there. And later, I'll take you to where we end up seeing how some of these elephants are actually returned back to their wild habitats. But from there, we went to the Masai Mara, which is a very, very famous natural reserve. Many people go on safari to. And it was really, for me, just incredible to be able to be on this landscape. It's very iconic. I think everybody's familiar with the imagery from Kenya. I had a travel sponsor for my journey by Adventures, which provided me with the Jeep that enabled us to do the photography work and the film work that I was doing during that time. It's my driver, Edwin, who was a wonderful guide and educator of a lot of the natural history in the Masai Mara. And the iconic acacia trees are everywhere, and the landscape is amazing because there's really just wildlife everywhere. I was so blown away by being able to see elephants and other creatures relatively easily. um, my big reason for wanting to go there was to connect with the Mara Elephant Project, which is one of the organizations that has been affiliated with World Elephant Day for several years. And they're doing very, very important work there to protect the population in that region of the Masai Mara. They're actually working in one conservancy area, which is the Lamet Conservancy. And they're doing some very important identification work to keep track of which elephants are there, and having an ability of a kind of like a database of these elephants over time. I mean, elephants live pretty much the same number of years as humans, and so getting to know these elephants when they're at a young age and then following their lives throughout their course of history is really, really important for scientists to be able to track elephants. And so the Mara Elephant Project has really worked out some very innovative methods of watching elephants and surveying elephants using some really fascinating drone technology, which allows observation of the elephants without really disturbing them. So it was really, really great to see the work that they were doing there, and to see seeing how this work was put into action. Maasai giraffe. There are lots of giraffe there too, which was really wonderful to see. Other types of ungulate species, the topi on the plains, the wildebeest, which a lot of people are familiar with from a lot of the Great Migration imagery that people may have seen, the black-backed jackal. This was actually quite uh, amazing to see this animal because they're very, very shy. This particular species of jackal actually is a daytime jackal because many jackal are nocturnal, but this jackal is out in the day, and so this was really a rare opportunity to be able to photograph them. Of course, the buffalo, and just basically wildlife everywhere. It's as a photographer, it's a real it's a real thrill to be able to be in that environment and have the opportunities to photograph these animals. Now, this particular morning was quite special because this tusker, his name is Fred, um, he was in trouble. he, as you can see there, has a collar around him, and he's one of the collared tuskers in the Masai Mara, one of the oldest living tuskers in the Masai Mara. He's about 56 years old. And the Mara Elephant Project does a lot of this, as I said, drone surveillance. And a lot of times they're doing this at night. They've got these really elaborate, innovative night vision cameras on their drones. And so what they were able to see on this particular evening, that Fred was actually in trouble. He had an injury and he was limping. And so there was a lot of concern about what might have happened for him, and without wanting to risk him maybe getting that injury getting infected, the Mara Elephant Project wanted to sedate him so that they could actually investigate the wound and treat the wound. So I was fortunate because I was invited to come out with them that morning to actually be present for when Fred was actually sedated. And it was quite an incredibly impressive operation. The Mara Elephant Project has one of the only helicopters, actually, I think the only helicopter in the Masai Mara. And so they were able to dart Fred from the air. And we kind of watched how that happened. It's pretty dramatic for poor Fred. There you'll see the dart in his hindquarters there. And eventually, after about 10 minutes, he eventually fell and went to sleep. Um, and we followed him along in the helicopter and in the jeeps as he hit the ground. And then once that happened, the vet team and the scientists and everybody got together quite quickly to come to his side to be able to look at him and check out what was going on, because we only had about 20 minutes to do this before the sedation would wear off. And so it was a great opportunity to get the data on Fred, to measure his tusks, to check his teeth, and most importantly, to check the injury. And it had been actually a spear wound that looked like he'd been actually speared by one of the farmers in the region, probably because he had wandered into the cropland area and was probably eating some of the corn crops. And this is a consistent problem with the human elephant conflict issues, as I said, not just in Kenya, but throughout Africa and Asia, and a growing problem as human civilization continues to encroach upon their habitat. So it was pretty incredible to be able to work with the team there. The mobile vet clinic actually works with as well the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. They provide veterinarian support for wild elephants in the Mara. This was two of the scientists working with the Mara Elephant Project. It was really great to meet them and spend time with them. They're such passionate young Kenyan scientists, really, really passionate about elephant science. They're the ones that are actually doing the identification studies of the populations there. They're creating a document they're calling the Elephant Book, which is pretty amazing to see how they were assembling that data. And as everyone was there treating Fred, he eventually did wake up. We got everything that needed to be done. And he woke up. He was a little bit bleary-eyed after. You can sort of see there on the bottom left the wound that he had attained from the spearing, but it's now been treated. And he wandered off back into the forest. And it was just a really special opportunity for me to be able to witness this firsthand, and to see this really important work of the Mara Elephant Project. Led me to my next location we went to, which was in Tsavo East and West National Parks, which are in kind of the southern area of Kenya, the biggest national parks in Kenya, and the biggest stronghold of the elephant populations there as well. So really dynamic environment, and that part of the country is very fertile. There are lots of agricultural areas and lots of food growing everywhere. So we actually stopped at one of the markets on the way down to driving to the national park. It was really kind of exciting for me to see such incredible food sources, and we were getting supplies for our lodging when we were staying there for the few days that we were there. And once we got to the Savo Park, we had to basically set up our camp and everything through the lodge that we were staying at the Galdessa River. I was staying at the Galdessa Lodge, which was actually run by the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. And there we were met by this wild elephant, a young bull by the name of Eddie, and he came to visit, which was really fun. He's not an actual orphaned elephant, he's an actual true blue wild elephant. It was really, really great to meet him. He was quite curious about us and very, very gentle. And apparently, he's been coming to visit guests there at the Galdessa Lodge for quite some time. So I felt quite honored that he came to say hello. And it was really kind of nice to be able to get up close and personal with him. And the lodge area actually is protected by an electric fence. So we were actually pretty safe in there, even though it looks like we're exposed to the wilderness. But he was quite curious, and I was able to get some really nice photographs of him too. And around there, there's just quite a lot of wildlife there, a lot of bird life. Hippos are residents there at the Galdessa River, so I was able to get up early and get some really great photos of the hippos. They're really fun to watch. They're such a um, interesting and rather, comical animal. Although they can't be taken lightly, they can be actually quite dangerous and known to be quite aggressive, in fact, even though they don't look like they'd be that way, but apparently they are. And for me, being out on the land and being able to get some of these amazing photos in the Savo landscape was just remarkable. This particular morning, we were actually driving across Savo East to the Voi reintegration unit, where some of the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust older orphans are getting ready for reintroduction to the wild. And we met up with this matriarch, and she came out on the road because she had her family that she wanted to cross the road with her, but she didn't want us to be in the way. So she made it pretty obvious to us that she didn't want us around. And I'll tell you, I mean, I've had a lot of experiences with elephants in the wild, filming them and photographing them. But when you have a large matriarch coming at you and shaking her head and her trunk and waving her ears and making it very clear that she wants you to stand back and give her space, you listen. So it was amazing to watch this. I mean, it's pretty menacing. And she was not really being that aggressive. She was just more or less stating her case and being assertive. We backed the Jeep up and just kind of gave her that space. And eventually she was able to allow her family to cross the road with her. And once that was done, she relaxed and was actually able to get some really nice photographs of her. And there she is here, and actually a photo that I use as my title photograph for my webinar. But through around the Savo landscape, it's pretty amazing. There's lots of cool animals. This is one of the long neck gazelle, actually called I think the Jaraneck it's called, and these are really interesting animals. They feed kind of standing up with their long neck, browsing from the brushes around them. And the leopard actually was one of my most favorite animals to photograph. I haven't had a lot of experience photographing big cats. I haven't really done too much work with big cats, so this was kind of like one of my first opportunities to get close to a leopard. So I was quite excited about this, although she was keeping her distance. But she actually had a cub in the cave that she was coming out of. I wasn't actually able to photograph the cub, but nonetheless, it was beautiful to see him. They're just like spectacular animals. And then from there, we ended up at the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust's Voi reintegration unit, which is where the elephants that are older from the nursery are now brought to the reintegration units, where they're actually now into their kind of like their last years of being in high school, basically, where they're out in the wild, they're not in the nursery any longer, and they form sort of community groups with each other, and they spend a lot of time out on the land. still under the supervision of the keepers, but they start to learn how to forage for themselves. And they still get supplemented with milk during the day in the stockades where they come into and sleep at night. But out during the day, they're actually out in the wild, and it's eventually a bit of a learning for them for when they eventually do go back to join the wild elephants that are in this region. So I had such a great time here this day because I'd never really been able to see these elephants at this age with in the Sheldrick Trust's work. So these are um, elephants who I've kind of followed over these years that I've been doing World Elephant Day and following the work of these different organizations. So it was really, really great for me to actually see these elephants maturing and learning how to be wild elephants again and really forming these kind of orphaned families because as these elephants have been orphaned at a very young age and so have lost their family members and so are now kind of forming new families with each other. The bond really with the keepers is really remarkable and how they have such a knowledge of these elephants and an ability to communicate with them um, in a really special way. And one of the keepers I asked, how do you know when the elephant is ready to go back to the wild? And he described to me that, they really let the keepers know they start to want to spend more time alone or more time out on the land and not coming back in as often into the stockades or into the areas where they get their milk during the daytime, and they really start to kind of indicate that sometimes they really do want to just grow up and move out into the wild and join the other elephants. So I thought that was pretty neat that they were able to sort of gauge each elephant, and each elephant was a little bit different in terms of how much time they needed. But generally, by the time they're age 10 is when they're ready to go back to the wild. Uh, these are another really incredible animal that I saw there, the water doe. That was really nice to be able to photograph them. And the dik-dik is another small antelope. I believe the smallest antelope, kind of almost the size of a large rabbit, also very shy. And just along through going through Savo, we see that, a lot of these elephants actually look red, and often people refer to them as the red elephants. And it's not because they are really red, but because the soil is so rich and volcanic in this region and filled with a lot of iron, and so it has a reddish tinge to it. So the elephants become kind of red colored because they often dust bathe in the soil and the dirt, and so gives them this kind of appearance of being red. So it's quite visually stunning to see them like this. There's lots of big family groups around. These are one of the wild groups that we encountered. Um, there was a particular group here of juvenile um, elephants that were, I guess, under the sort of guidance of this matriarch, but the juveniles were quite curious about us. And so they kind of came out in a little gang to sort of check us out. Um, and it was quite fun to watch them because they were trying to sort of be very brave and sort of do these little kind of mock charges at our Jeep and then would sort of back off and see what we would do. So I really enjoyed watching their curiosity towards us. Not really afraid, but cautious. So on this afternoon, as we made our way back to our lodge, we came across another group of Maasai giraffe, looking at one of these termite mounds. These termite mounds are kind of dot the landscape everywhere in Kenya. They're quite unique, quite architectural, actually. They're abandoned, kind of places where termites once lived, but they kind of create a bit of an interesting feature on the landscape. Uh, the baboons are around. We had a great opportunity to encounter these playful creatures. Uh, Baboons are a little bit mischievous and quite curious about us. But it was really fun to see this family group. Of course, the males are quite impressive. Baboons are dangerous as well. They can known to be quite aggressive. And this male, I believe he was probably they kind of have harem social structures, and I think he was kind of the boss of this particular group, and he was wanting to show us his teeth, which I was very happy to be in the Jeep, not on the ground when that was happening. Um, but you know, lots of amazing animals, as I said, everywhere. The antelopes, different species, the zebra. This particular group of zebra that we encountered were quite fun to watch. The three musketeers, as I was calling them. They were doing some kind of dust bathing here, and it was really fun to watch these zebra interact and roll around in the ground in the dust. And it was kind of interesting because they were all rolling around in this same area, the same little dust patch, and couldn't really quite figure out why they were so attached to this particular area. But they were quite kind of possessive about having access to this little dust patch, and they were kind of taking turns rolling around. And it's just always fun to be out watching animals do their thing. And they finished up their rolling around and kind of wandered off. Um, as we made our way back to the stockades, which is at the other end of the the Savo East Park, where the Voi reintroduction unit is established. This is the stockade area where those elephants come in at night because they're still protected at night. They're still young and vulnerable, so they're not quite ready to spend their nights out in the wild. So they come in every evening for their supplemental milk and sleep in these stockade areas together under the watchful eye of their keepers. But as some of these elephants are getting older, they're eating, as I said, the milk less and less. But what's really nice about these elephants too is as they've all kind of growing up together, they're forming these bonds with each other. So they um, kind of all sleep together and have made these new sort of family units for themselves. They come in, running fast. It's really kind of fun to watch, and can't wait to have their milk. And many of these keepers have been working with these elephants for over 25 years. Have been working with the Shelter Trust for over 25 years, rather, and are very, very knowledgeable about the needs of these elephants. They start to eat a lot of the local foliage as well, which has a lot of nutritional value. And then here they are kind of in their sleeping areas where they spend the night. amazing to see the wild herds in the rivers. This was in the Galdessa River. At dusk, they often come together to water. And um, one of the other areas that was really interesting was right at the entrance to the Tsavo Park. There was a gathering of bull elephants right underneath these hydro lines, which I found kind of an interesting juxtaposition of these impressive bull elephants against the sort of, icons of human civilization. But they all kind of gathered around this area right up. You can see the highway in the background. It was kind of an interesting group of bull behavior. This was when we were leaving Savo after being there for a few days to travel to Sarara, which is actually in the north of Thailand. And we flew there in a couple of small aircraft in the north part of Thailand, of Kenya, which is much, much more mountainous. And Matthew Mountain Range, really spectacular, special area. We were visiting a region, the Sarara Valley and the Namunyak Conservancy, which is actually owned and managed by the Samburu tribe, who have been there for hundreds of years. And this particular region has another species of giraffe, the reticulated giraffe. And it was really a beautiful time to come there. The rainy season was a little bit late that particular area, a year in that particular region. So everything was still quite green. And the reticulated giraffe has a really specific kind of markings different from the Maasai giraffe that I showed you earlier. Of course, coming into another watering hole area where some other elephant groups were coming in the midday. It's always fun to watch the baby elephants play in the watering holes. They're always filled with all kinds of mischievous antics and dust bathing. Lots of bird life in this region too. And it's also really incredible to see that this amount of diversity. And also, it's really the home of the Reteti Elephant Sanctuary, which is another elephant orphanage in Kenya. And this is actually run by the Samburu tribe. And it's the first community-run elephant sanctuary in Kenya, and actually, I believe in Africa. And they've been operating since, I think, 2016, so relatively new. But again, orphaned elephants coming from this region of the Samburu and northern Kenya national park areas. And the Samburu have been also nurturing these young elephants with different milk formulas, and very much similar to the Sheldrick Trust in that the orphan babies form groups and new family units among themselves. And then a lot of passion with this group as well. These people that were really dedicated to preserving this particular area for these elephants. And these elephants eventually too are being released back to the wild in this region of the Namunyak Conservancy, which is about 1 million acres in this region of northern Kenya. I was really, really impressed with Ritetti's work and the involvement of the community. It was nice to see community-led conservation. And I think this is something we're going to be seeing a lot more of, within Kenya and other parts of Africa, where a lot of the younger community are really getting involved in the preservation, protection of wildlife because it is their heritage. Um, Samburu is a national park area as well near the Namuluk Conservancy, and it's also the home base for Save the Elephants, which is one of Kenya's and the world's actual leading African elephant scientific research work that's been led by Dr. Ian Douglas Hamilton. And I was very excited to be able to visit their research station and meet some of their team. Uh, Ian Douglas Hamilton started Save the Elephants in the 1970s and had conducted quite a lot of study and research on this particular group of elephants in Samburu, which is considered really one of the best studied groups of elephants in Africa. And the region also has a lot of wildlife, specific reticulated giraffe. This was actually really interesting behavior to watch. These elephants were, or rather, giraffe were courting. And I think there was a kind of courting behavior going on with a number of these giraffes in some of these other areas where I was visiting. But it was, kind of interesting to see this dynamic between these two giraffes. The elephants here are collared. The work of Ian Douglas Hamilton was really the beginning of the telemetry work that's been done on elephants, which telemetry enabling scientists to study the movements of elephants through different types of tracking, GPS tracking, and now with drone surveillance, some of the technologies that are being developed, so the populations can be monitored, which is really important for the preservation of these populations of elephants. So we came to this other group here, collared elephants. We were able to track them, and I was with some of the team from the Save the Elephants who could identify these elephants and know them all really as individuals. Now, one of the other zebra experiences, which was interesting, was with this zebra. This is the Graves zebra, which is a different species than the one I showed you earlier. And this is an endangered species of zebra, which is really only up in this northern area of Kenya. Quite different markings. This particular zebra, he was also a little bit imperiled. He had been injured. And the researchers I was with were trying to sort of figure out what his condition was, and you can actually see he's got some blood stains on his nose there. He had been injured from his hind leg, and we weren't sure if maybe he had been attacked by predator, by a lion. And sure enough, as we were driving there, we did find the lioness, and she was on the prowl. And we think this zebra might have been aware of that. This was kind of a great opportunity for me to do some photography of lions. And so we watched this, the zebra, he seemed to know that she was watching him. It's late in the day, and I wasn't really that excited about photographing a kill. And fortunately, we didn't witness anything, but she was definitely aware of him. And we were at that point having to get out of the national park because you're not really supposed to be in there past sundown. So the story of what happened to this zebra and the lioness remains unknown because we never did know in the end if she did actually have him for dinner. But the landscape is stunning, and for me, it was a really beautiful conclusion to my time there in Kenya, to be able to sort of see full circle these different landscapes and the dynamics between the wildlife in these landscapes. So with that, I'd like to leave you with kind of an inspirational video that we've made for World Elephant Day, which more or less kind of outlines some of the challenges that elephant populations are facing. And this song that was used for this video was donated to us by an award-winning indie folk band from Scotland known as Elephant Sessions. And they donated the song to us. We made this video, which is drawn from a lot of the film footage from some of our documentaries that we've made as an inspirational World Elephant Day video. World Elephant Day comes around every year, August 12th. So I urge you to support our efforts and our work and the work of all the different elephant conservation organizations that are dedicated to helping elephants worldwide. And you can follow these activities on our social media. And people often ask me, what can they do to help elephants? And, there are some pretty clear steps. Don't buy ivory or wildlife products. Don't support organizations that exploit or abuse elephants for entertainment. And follow World Elephant Day. Our website is worldelephantday.org. And follow the work of the Friends of World Elephant Day. You can see a number of these organizations listed on our website that are doing really, really important work for the preservation of elephants. So I think we might have some time for some questions.
Yes.
And
Thank you, Patricia, for your wonderful work in wildlife conservation, especially with the elephants, and also for sharing your beautiful photographs. So To start off our Q&A, I would like to mention that coincidentally, I was with a group of friends who recently returned from a 10-day tour to Thailand and Cambodia, visiting world famous temples, museums, and attractions. One of the highlights of this trip was a visit to the elephant sanctuary in Pattaya City on the eastern Gulf Coast of Thailand. Our tour group got a close up look at a small herd of four rescued elephants now living together as a family. We got to see the elephants enjoying their newfound freedom as they played and explored their jungle habitat. We got to feed them, get up close and hug them, and splash in the water with them. It was an experience we'll never forget. So, Patricia, have you ever visited this remarkable Pattaya Elephant Sanctuary in Thailand?
Well, actually, no, I have not been to the Pattaya Elephant Sanctuary, but I've certainly spent a lot of time in northern Thailand in a number of other elephant sanctuaries that are similar, actually, and don't promote elephants in chains or performing in a show ring and doing tricks, but really have elephants behaving naturally in their own natural groups and interacting naturally with people, not being, forced to do that. And that's become more and more of an awareness building for tourism for those that want to go and see elephants, encounter elephants, get up close and personal with elephants. And so we really support that type of tourist activity if you're going to Asia, because it's harder to see wild elephants in Asia than it is in Africa, just because of the nature of where Asian elephants live in the wild. They're often in deep jungle areas, and it's harder to trek through to find them. So a lot of these places, like in Thailand, probably being the most popular destination for travelers to want to have encounters with elephants. And so we really try to encourage these ethical places where elephants aren't ridden. That's another thing that we don't really want to support people riding elephants. But having these kind of natural educational encounters with elephants, like what you were describing, Jeff. So that's really great that you had that experience.
Yes. What I'd like to do is go to some questions from our audience. Um, the first one, what are the typical and distinct social behaviors in elephants?
Well, as I mentioned, I mean, elephants are a lot like people, actually, maybe more like people than any other animal. They have very strong social bonds. Their social groups are led by a matriarch, an older female who's the knowledge keeper, essentially. And they're very empathetic. They're really known to be a very caring animal. They really care for each other. They help each other. They help other animals. They're caretakers of their environment, as seed dispersers. They through their migration, because they eat vegetation, and then they plant seeds through their dung as they, make their way through their habitat, so they're planting seeds essentially, moving vegetation, digging for water, finding water sources for other animals. So they're very much, a social animal, very collaborative, empathetic, sensitive. They basically have a lot of the qualities that people strive to have, or should strive to have, is often what I say to people. I think we actually should all be more like elephants. And of course, they have great memories. They're known for their memories. Elephants never forget is a very, very big part of their survival mechanism. And there's been some really interesting studies done on the elephant memory as well. So lots of really cool things about elephants.
Yes, well, I agree completely with the social aspects with elephants. Next question. A number of years ago, elephants that were part of circuses in the US were rescued and are no longer part of this industry, where would these elephants go?
Oh, well, yes, that's very important work. There's a couple of places in the United States that have taken in retired circus and zoo elephants. One of them is in Tennessee. It's called the Tennessee Elephant Sanctuary. And the other one is in Northern California, known as PAWS, Performing Art Animal Welfare Organization. And that's where these elephants are. So they're living in pretty big areas. They're completely free roaming. They're completely looked after. They don't have to do anything. Every day they just wake up and just be elephants. And they form bonds with each other, and new relationships. And there's been actually quite a lot of writing that's been done about both these organizations. So if people are interested to visit these organizations, you can visit them. As I said, Tennessee Elephant Sanctuary or PAWS in Tennessee or California. And they're doing really, really important work because a lot of these places now, I mean, there's really virtually no need for circuses. And I think less and less people want to see animals performing in that way. And even with zoos now as well. I mean, I mentioned Kamala. She was at the Calgary Zoo, but actually, since that time, the Calgary Zoo stopped its elephant program because the climate in Canada was far too cold for elephants. So she was actually moved to a zoo in Washington, where you know it's more temperate climate, and slowly a lot of these elephant programs in the zoos are shutting down as well. I mean, there's some facilities that still have pretty good big elephant exhibits, like San Diego Zoo, of course, is one of them. But a lot of the smaller operations and certainly the performing circuses and such, those elephants have gone to sanctuaries where they're just living out their lives as elephants.
Okay, great. Let me just do, we're running a little late here, but we've got one question here. That's our final question. Do elephants live in every African country? Do the majority live in Kenya? Also, I donate annually to the African Wildlife Foundation, but would like to find additional groups to support. You mentioned several. Are there especially good ones to support, or conversely, any to avoid? Great presentation. Thank you.
Well, actually, most of elephants in Africa live in Botswana. They have the largest elephant population. There's a number of organizations throughout Africa. There are some countries that don't have elephants, but I'm trying to remember now. There's not that many. Some of the smaller countries don't have elephants or only have very, very few elephants. Um, the list of organizations that you might be interested in also supporting, I mean, African Wildlife Foundation is also one of our friend organizations, as we call them, or you know, organizations that have recognized and get involved with World Elephant Day each year. I mean, World Elephant Day has become a very important fundraising day for elephant organizations and for the public. And you know, various organizations have utilized World Elephant Day as an awareness building day, an advocacy day, a fundraising day. So if you want to go to learn about organizations that are doing really important work for elephant conservation, if you go to the World Elephant Day website, you'll see there's a tab there that says Friends of World Elephant Day. And there's a whole list. There's over 100 different organizations that are listed there, and they're all represented in different countries in Africa and Asia. And I should point out that the Asian elephants are really in trouble, and there's a lot of need to support the work for Asian elephants right now, particularly in India. You know, India has like the last stronghold of wild Asian elephants left on the planet. I mean, as I mentioned, there's only 40,000 Asian elephants left. They're a critically endangered animal, and most of those elephants are living in India. And with the human population growth of India, the habitat restrictions that elephants are facing now are really, really, really problematic for both people and elephants. And ultimately, I mean, that's what we're looking at for the future is we're really looking at habitat loss and preservation of habitat so that these animals and all the other creatures living in these habitats can continue to thrive. we have to find ways to live peacefully with elephants. And so a lot of these efforts, a lot of these organizations now are doing really important work in establishing strategies on human elephant conflict mitigation. So I really urge you to check out our website and look into some of the specific work of these organizations I mentioned. I mean, of course, Sheldon Wildlife Trust does an incredible work, in the rescuing of the baby elephants, the orphan elephants, as does the Ritteti Elephant Sanctuary. Those four organizations that I visited in Kenya were really some of the ones for me that were very, very important to see and visit firsthand, personally on the ground, because they're all doing really, really important work and all a little bit different and all significantly vital in terms of coming together with how we're going to be preserving. It's not just elephants. I mean, elephants are keystone species, but by elephants being healthy in an ecosystem, that means all the other wildlife can be that way too. So it's great that you're supporting this work with the African Wildlife Foundation, and please continue to do so, because we need all the help we can get.
Yes. Well, a big thank you to all of your work that you're doing and continued success with World Elephant Day. So I would now like to turn it over to our president and executive director, Karen Karpowicz, who has some closing remarks.
Yes,
Hello, Karen.
hi, Jeff. Thank you so much, Jeff. This was a really, really good presentation. And thank you, Patricia, also. It's a little different than what we've done, but very important. And I think it's something that we all care about. And it's important that we do support environmental causes like this, because it's important to who we are as people. I want to congratulate you, Jeff, and the Kansas City branch. Again, as Jeff said, these are all curated by our branches. Congratulations to the Happy Hour Committee. And I just want to remind everybody that the English Speaking Union is a membership organization. And if you're not a member, please become one. And I also wanted to mention our Founders Award event, which is going to be in Winter Park, Florida, hosted in conjunction with our Central Florida branch. I hope I see you there. It's March the 15th. And on our National Shakespeare competition at Lincoln Center on April the 28th. Thank you all and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to do this talk.
Thank you.